It was supposed to be a routine mission, another day in the sky for a highly trained U.S. aircrew. But somewhere over the vast, empty expanse, their aircraft vanished. There was no distress call. No wreckage was ever confirmed. And for decades, the official explanation has been a confusing mix of silence and contradiction. Even today, key files remain sealed, and the government refuses to explain what really happened to the men on board. This is the story of a flight that disappeared, and the disturbing questions that linger long after the search was called off. Let's set the scene. The date is March 6, 1950. A Douglas C-5 for Skymaster, military designation number 4-7-469, is preparing for a long-haul flight from Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska to Great Falls, Montana. On board are 44 people, 8 crew members, and 36 passengers, all U.S. military personnel and their families, including women and children. This wasn't some top-secret spy plane or an experimental craft. The C-54 was a reliable workhorse of the military, known for its sturdiness and safety record. The crew was experienced, led by Captain Harry G. Thetford, a veteran pilot. Weather reports for their route were clear. There were no signs of trouble, no red flags, nothing to suggest that this flight would be anything other than completely ordinary. After taking off at 1:29 p.m. local time, the plane climbed into the Alaskan sky and settled on its course, just as planned. For the first few hours, everything was nominal. The flight was scheduled to make a routine check-in call as it passed over Snag, a small village in Canada's Yukon Territory. At 5:09 p.m., the C-54 made the call. The radio operator reported their position, altitude, and speed. He stated they were experiencing some ice buildup on the wings but described it as slight and manageable, nothing a seasoned crew couldn't handle. It was the last clear message anyone would ever receive from the aircraft. What happened next is where the official story begins to fray. Just minutes later, another garbled, frantic message was picked up. It was impossible to understand fully, but it was clear something was wrong. After that silence, the aircraft simply vanished from the sky. It never made its next scheduled check-in. It never arrived in Montana. Radar operators in the region later reported strange inconsistencies. Some saw a brief, erratic blip, while others saw nothing at all. At this point, the official reports begin to contradict each other. Different logs show different times for the last contact and the exact content of that final. Broken transmission has never been publicly clarified. The C-54 and all 44 souls on board were gone immediately. One of the largest search and rescue operations in North American history was launched. It was a joint effort between the United States and Canada, codenamed Operation Mike. Over the next several weeks, 85 American and Canadian aircraft scoured more than 350 square miles of unforgiving terrain across Alaska, the Yukon, and British Columbia. Ground crews and divers were deployed to investigate any potential lead. They searched frozen lakes, dense forests, and treacherous mountain ranges. The effort was massive, thorough, and relentless, yet they found nothing, not a single piece of confirmed wreckage, not a life raft, not a seat cushion, not a scrap of metal that could be definitively linked to the missing plane. Most disturbingly, no bodies were ever recovered. It was as if the 25-ton aircraft and the 44 people inside had been plucked from existence, adding another layer of mystery. Some of the initial search and intelligence records were later classified, and others that were eventually released were heavily edited, with entire sections blacked out. The search that was supposed to provide answers only created more questions. In the face of a complete lack of physical evidence, the U.S. Air Force had to come up with an explanation. Officially, the investigation concluded that the aircraft likely crashed and was destroyed for reasons unknown. That's it. No specific cause was ever determined. The final report offered several possibilities: severe weather, catastrophic mechanical failure, or perhaps the pilots became disoriented and flew into a mountain. But these were just theories. The report admitted there was no evidence to support any single one. Over time, the official narrative became even murkier. The tales from the initial investigation were quietly removed from public records. Conflicting timelines were never reconciled. Normally, investigations become clearer over time as new analysis is done. This one just became quieter. The file was stamped unresolved and closed. For the families of the 44 people who disappeared, this was an unacceptable and heartbreaking conclusion. They were left with no wreckage, no funerals, and no real answers. So, what doesn't add up? Let's stick to the facts. First, the missing radio transcripts. The full content of that last, garbled message has never been released. Why? If it contained clues about mechanical failure or weather, it would be crucial evidence. Second, the radar gaps. Why were the reports from different radar stations inconsistent? In a high-stakes search, precise data is everything. The lack of a clear, final radar track is a significant anomaly. Third, the conflicting timelines. Official documents show different times for the last known contact. This isn't just a minor clerical error. It changes the entire search grid and the sequence of events, and perhaps the most telling point, other military planes have crashed in that region, and in nearly every case, wreckage was eventually found, sometimes decades later, but not from the C-54. The government says the case is closed, but the evidence, or rather, the lack of it, says something else is going on. For over 7 years, the fate of Flight 47 to 469 has been sealed away in classified files. Until those documents are released and the missing pieces of the puzzle are put on the table, this will remain one of America's most chilling and unresolved aviation mysteries. Thanks for watching. If you find these unsolved cases as fascinating as I do, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories that history forgot. See you next time.